So what's going on guys, Kids here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the top 3 new best Paladin builds in New World 2023. So for each and every single build I will explain what attributes, weapon masteries and even weapon and gear perks you want to have. Then what gems and specific gear you want to use to get out your stats as much damage as possible. Then as well I will show you the best gameplay of me using different weapons, so you would know which abilities you want to use first on your enemies and much more. So if this sounds interesting to you, then let's get right into it. So then moving over to the first build, which is the flail and live staff, and these are the attributes you want to have. So no matter from which level you start using this build, you first of all want to get your focus to 200 and then get 100 points in constitution, and then continue putting everything else in focus and constitution. And then around max level and max gear item score, you should have around 100 strength, 350 focus and 150 constitution. And lastly, for your gear you want to go with the light category, and this of course means using every single light equipment with a round shield, which is the lightest possible shield in the game. So then taking a closer look at the first weapon, which is the flail, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. And if you want to unlock these perks and skills in the most efficient way, then just follow the numbers on the screen. So then moving over to the second weapon, which is the live staff, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. So same thing again, if you want to unlock these perks and skills in the most efficient way, then just follow the numbers on the screen. But mostly this is up to you as long as you unlock all the same skills and perks at the end game. Okay, so now let's go over to the gameplay, where I will show you the best way to play this build. So for the first weapon we have the flail, and your first Q ability is called the Arcane Smite, and this skill will make your character leap forwards and strike the ground, which will do damage in 2.7 meter range. While behind ourselves we will leave this hazardous area that will do damage for 6 seconds, and weaken the enemy for additional 10%. Then the next skill is called the Arcane Vortex, which will swirl the flail above us and do 4 quick hits that all deal damage in 3 meter range, and give us and our allies Empower buff for 10%. And then lastly we will be using the Arcane Eruption, which will create an eruption in front of our character, dealing damage to the enemies and inflicting 2 stacks of impairment for 6 seconds. So as you can tell, we will specifically be using skills that will do very good AoE damage and debuff the enemy at the same time. And then for the second weapon we have the live staff, and your first Q ability is called the Orb of Protection, which will shoot a simple orb and grant healing and armor buffs if you hit an ally or do damage if you hit the enemy. Then the R skill is called Beacon, which will shoot a light projectile that will heal all allies in 3 meter range for 10 seconds. And then finally we have the F skill called the Sacred Ground, which will shoot very similar circle-shaped healing spell, and again it will do even more healing and last for 12 seconds. So as you can tell, we usually want to use both of them at the same time, then step into the circles and then start fighting, or just use them on our teammates. Okay, so then let's move over to the rotation, and no matter if you're farming mobs in PvE or doing PvP, the same principle and rules apply. So then at the beginning of the fight we want to start with the live staff, and keep using auto attacks from the range to hit the enemy. Then when he gets closer we wanna drop our beacon and sacred ground on top of each other, so then we step into it while changing to our flare weapon, and then from here we keep on using auto attacks while using the Arcane Vortex and then the rest of our Arcane Smite and Eruption skills. And then if we ever get low HP or we need to heal our allies, we just again switch to the live staff. This playstyle is very simple, so just keep in mind that you're a healer first. So you drop your healing spells, then switch to the flare for pure damage and to debuff the enemy, and then you just keep rotating between the weapons depending on what you need, and that's about it. So now for my last and final conclusions. This flail and live staff weapon combination right now is one of the best builds in your world. This build will give you high damage, while at the same time giving you the ability to heal yourself and your allies. You can even turn this into a more of a paladin build with a full heavy armor, but it's up to you. I like the ability to dodge the enemy attacks while doing damage close range, or just staying away from the fights and heal my teammates. So then last but not the least, for the flail and live staff, you want to use the diamond gem. And then for all of your gear, use the malachite gem for PvP, or then the abyssal ward gem for PvE. And then on your character, you want to equip the stalwart heart rune of stone form. And then finally, for consumables and perks, those are your personal preference. I personally for healers would recommend to collect armor with perks, that will improve your healing output and armor. But of course depending on what you want to do, this will be different for every single player. So then in a quick summary, if you're looking for the best healer flail build in this new world season update, then here you go. So then moving over to the second build, which is the flail and warhammer, and these are the attributes you want to have. So first things first, if you start from level 0, you want to get your focus to 100 and 200 in constitution, and then continue putting everything else in focus and constitution. And then around max level and max gear item score, you should have around 100 strength, 150 focus, and 350 constitution. And then lastly for your gear, you want to go with the heavy category, and this of course means using every single heavy equipment with a tower shield. So then taking a closer look at the first weapon, which is the flail, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. And if you want to unlock these perks and skills in the same most efficient way, then just follow these numbers on the screen. So then moving over to the second weapon, which is the warhammer, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. So same thing again, if you want to unlock these perks and skills in the most efficient way, then just follow these numbers on the screen. But mostly this is up to you, as long as you unlock all the same skills and perks. Okay, so now let's go over to the gameplay, where I will show you the best way to play this build. So for the first weapon we have the flail, and your first Q ability is called the Arcane Smite. This skill will make your character leap forwards and strike the ground, which will do damage in 2.7 meter range, while behind ourselves leaving a hazardous area that will do damage for 6 seconds, and weaken the enemy for additional 10%. Then the second skill is called the Arcane Eruption, which will create an eruption in front of our character, dealing damage to enemies, and inflicting 2 stacks of impairment for 6 seconds. And then lastly we have the Warding Bludgeon, which will perform a spinning leap. This will do damage, and while you're leaping, you will get a reinforced fortification, which will increase your armor for the next 8 seconds. And then for the second weapon we have the warhammer, and your first Q spell is called the Shockwave, which will slam your hammer into the ground, causing a 3-meter earthquake that deals damage and staggers and roots enemies in front of you for 2 seconds. Then the second skill is called the Path of Destiny, which will create this powerful ground strike that deals a lot of damage in the AoE range. And then lastly we have the Wrecking Ball. This skill will strike the ground with your warhammer, dealing damage and at the same time knocking down your enemies. Okay, so then let's move over to the rotation. And no matter if you're farming mobs in PvE or doing PvP, the same principle and rules apply. So then at the beginning of the fight we want to start with using the Arcane Smite and Arcane Eruption, which will debuff the enemy and do damage. So then we use the Warding Bludgeon, and then right away we switch to our second weapon, the Warhammer. And then from here we keep using the Shockwave, and then right after the rest of the 2 skills. The main idea behind this playstyle is to do a lot of damage, but first of all dealing damage and debuffing the enemy with the flail, and then switch to the Warhammer for even more damage, or just general stunts, which will be very useful for group PvP or general PvE like expeditions and etc. So now for my last and final conclusions. This flail and warhammer weapon combination is one of the new tank builds for this meta. This setup will give you insane armor and just general tankiness, while at the same time giving you the option to do damage and hold aggro in PvE content, or on the other hand annoy the enemy in PvP content. This flail tank build works great for both PvE and PvP, so in my opinion having a very versatile build works perfect for those players who don't want to farm 20 different gear sets and weapons just to play a build for different events. So overall this build is a jack of all trades. And then for the flail and warhammer you want to use the cruel gem for PvP and the carnelian gem for PvE. And then for all of your gear use all Enix gems for PvP or abyssal gems for PvE. And then on your character you want to equip the Stalwart Heart Rune of Stone form. And then finally for consumables and perks, those are your personal preference. I personally for tanks would recommend to collect armor with perks that will improve your health, armor and different resistances, depending on what type of content you are doing. But of course depending on what you want to do, this will be different for every player. So in a quick summary, if you're looking for the new meta flail tank build, then for sure try this one out and have fun. And now moving over to my last and final build, which is the Greatsword and Sword with Shield. And these are the attributes you want to have. So first things first, if you start from level 0, you want to get your strength and dexterity to 200 and then start building your constitution, and around level 60 you should have 200 strength, 150 dexterity and 100 constitution. And then last but not the least, for your gear you want to go with the medium category, and you want to use one of those circle shaped small shields as well, and yes, each shield type has different weight, so don't forget to use the lightest shield, that still will make you in the medium category. So then taking a closer look at the first weapon, which is the greatsword, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. So first things first, you want to unlock the first ability called the crosscut, and then get these 2 perks. Then now get the second ability called the skyward slash, and then get these 2 perks. Then from here, let's move over to the other side and unlock these 2 perks, and then the last final ability called the steadfast strike, and then get these 2 perks, and that's it. Now from this moment, you can spend your points in whatever way you like. So then moving over to the second weapon, which is the sword, and these are the weapon masteries you want to have. So first of all, you want to select these 2 perks, and then the first ability called the leaping strike, and then get these 2 perks. Then from here, let's go over to the other side and unlock the last 2 abilities called the shield rush and shield bash, and then lastly get these 2 perks, and that's it. Now again, from this point and onwards, you can spend your points in whatever way you prefer. Okay, so now let's go over to the gameplay where I'll show you the best way to play this build. And for the first weapon we have the greatsword, and your first Q ability is called the crosscut, which will perform 3 quick slash attacks, that with each attack will do more damage. Then the second skill is called the skyward slash, which will swing up your sword that will stagger, do damage and apply a range stacks on the enemy. And then lastly we have the steadfast strike, which will stab your enemies and can do up to 2 hits, which will do damage more and more and restore mana upon finishing the animation. And in PvE, this skill can be used to aggro all the monsters as well. And then for the second weapon we have the sword with shield, and your Q spell is called the leaping strike, which will make you leap forwards that will do damage and stagger the enemy. Then the second skill is called the shield rush, which will quickly make your character rush forwards while dealing damage and pushing back your enemy. This skill is great for counter attacks, to cancel the enemy animation, or to help out your teammates. And then lastly we have the shield bash, which is a short skill that will stun the enemy for 2 seconds, and this is the longest stunning ability in the game. Okay, so then let's move over to the rotation, and as I've already said, if you're farming mobs in PvE or doing PvP, the same general principles and rules apply. So at the start of the fight you want to use the sword and shield, and use the leaping strike to close the distance between you and the enemy. Then now use the shield rush, and then when the stagger ends, right away use the shield bash, which is the longest stun in the game. So then in those few seconds, now we want to switch to the greatsword and use the cross cuts, and keep spamming the heavy attacks. Then when the enemy starts dealing back damage to you, then now we use the skyward slash to do damage and stagger. And then lastly we use the steadfast strike, and then from here we just keep on using the greatsword attacks till the enemy gets eliminated. Or if you ever get in trouble, then switch back to the sword with shield and just keep on blocking the enemy attack by holding the right click, and that's it. So now for my last and final conclusions for this build. This greatsword and sword with shield weapon combination is super fun to play, and as you're using a medium armor, you can take some damage and at the same time do very high DPS numbers. So then last but not the least, for the greatsword and sword with shield, you want to use the opal gem, and then for all of your gear, use 3 malachite and 2 onyx gems. And then lastly, on your character, you want to equip the heart rune of detonate. And then on top of all this, to find out the best weapon and gear perks, watch this video, which is titled "Which weapon and gear perks are the best for your build?" You can find the link in this video description or just scroll through my channel. And in that video, I will specifically explain how perks work and which ones are the best for your gear and weapons and much more. So in a quick summary, if you're looking to do high damage and you want a fun greatsword build, then this is the one for you, so enjoy. And that's about it. So I really do appreciate everyone for watching, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, feedback or other good new world builds that you would like to see in the next video, then feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and you won't miss any more amazing content from me. With all this said, you have an amazing day and I will see you in my next video, so take it easy, peace.